Hello, hello, hello. I don't know I don't know. Okay. Maybe that's it. Kind of looks off. But anyway, we are live and welcome to um my channel. My name is Michelle Williams. I go by the Ignited Teacher here on social media. And what I do on my channel is I help math teachers like yourself or math interventionists, anyone that's interested in math that are new, not so new, or experienced, um, close learning gaps by providing teachers with tips that can be used as early as the next day in their classroom. So if you are watching me live, go ahead and tell me where you're watching from in the comment section and the audience that you teach or support today. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, for those of you all who are new, um, you can and you're interested in learning more about what I provide on for my audience, you can hop over here to my blog and hold on one second. What I do is I blog about five, I think it's five. One, two, three. Yes, five different topics. I focus more on inclusive math instruction for students. And what you can find on my website is blog posts. I have over 200 blog posts talking about different topics that will be project based learning, classroom management, response to intervention, and technology integration. I hadn't been doing much on technology integration, but hopefully, as I prepare and plan for the second half of the school year, I can talk more about technology integration. If that's something that you are interested in, definitely drop a comment in the comment section. Tell me what you're looking for or what you need for your classroom, some tips for your classroom, what you want to know or learn more about. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, tonight's topic is about student work analysis. Now, this is a big issue, and I thought it was a topic to definitely talk about because in the day and age of online testing, I don't think there has been a large enough focus on analyzing student work. And a lot of teachers that are new, because we do have this greening of education where we have new teachers, and especially with the influx of uncertified teachers who have not been trained in formal education pedagogy. Um, excuse me, nose is itching. So it's a lot. It's a lot for a lot of teachers. So I'm going to talk about student work and basically why you need to look at student work. And it goes back to math intervention. And let me pull up on my website a blog post about the math intervention cycle. Let me pull this down. So, this is a blog post that I wrote, Simplify Math Intervention how the math intervention cycle saves time for educators. So it talks about on this blog post, and let me go ahead and drop this in. This is the link to my blog, fuelgreatminds.com. What is the math intervention cycle? So, the math intervention cycle is a cycle that I created, and based on what I know for years, the response to intervention cycle is the overarching foundation for this math intervention cycle. So it's assess, diagnose, reteach, and reassess. Those are the 4 steps in the math intervention cycle. Well, when we're talking about analyzing student work in the math intervention cycle, it falls under the diagnose and reteach portion, which last week, if you didn't catch me last Sunday, you can watch what do you do if students are not responding to the math interventions. And we talk about it in there, how to readjust, look at students' work and the misconception. And this is that missing piece. So you have to have student work. And if you're a high school teacher that's watching, what you can do, this is a solution for you. You can put your students in groups of high, middle, and low. And then you could also have a fourth group, medium, low, or high, medium. There are certain characteristics of student work that students have. For example, your gifted and talented kids generally skip steps. If you are an experienced teacher and you've worked with a diverse student population, they generally skip steps. They try to do a lot of things in their head, and they don't, that's who they are, because intuitively the stuff just connects for them. Now, sometimes they will show their work. They're not the greatest at it. I am going to say that I had a little boy long time ago, and I introduced the word algorithm to children early on because they need to know that. So I was teaching 5th grade at the time, and one of my students was like, well, Miss Williams, do they have an algorithm for this? Because they want to get it done quickly. That's your high level kids, and it's certain things that you want those children to do, certain things that they do that you don't have to tell them to do. Then you have your medium students. Your medium students are your bell curve students, those students that are generally on grade level. These are the students that all of your resources are geared towards. It's not geared toward that high student that's moving or that student that's working below grade level. So there are certain things that a medium student does. So this is for those secondary teachers that have large classes. So then you break that those kids that are on that lower end and their characteristics of those students. And generally, I'm going to be honest with you, they're the same. For example, with students that struggle with mathematics, you're going to find a lot of times that the misconceptions that they have are they either are struggling with reading, they cannot problem solve, and generally do not know how to, well, they're not fluent with the 4 operations. They're not. So that's generally the characteristics of your students at the lower end. Those middle of the road students, they generally will do what you ask them to do or in the model. They follow generally what you have because they have a good foundation. Those are those students, and they will show their work, those middle students. So when you're talking about analyzing student works, there you look at what each group of students are doing and you come up with an idea or a list of what you're looking for in that work. And that's what I do. I look at all my students' work. I look at what the higher level kids are doing and what my lower level kids and what they're doing in the middle. Now, the first thing that you need to think about as a teacher, you need to create a learning progression. A learning progression is what is the prerequisite skills that the students need but to master this concept. Now, this is generally for grade levels that are first or higher. Kindergarten, there are some prerequisite skills, but generally speaking, you already know that the kids in kindergarten don't know what they don't know. But the expectation is that certain things they're supposed to have, say for instance, they should know their first and last name. Stuff real simple like that. But the further you get away from the elementary grade levels, the more difficult it becomes because I found out when I was a math interventionist at the high school that every time you peeled, well, not even peeled, every time you solved one problem, another problem arose because it was just not one issue that the students had. For example, my Algebra 1 students were struggling with slope. Well, I found out one of the issue is they didn't know what a negative and positive slope looked like on a graph. They didn't know what a zero slope is. They couldn't connect to real life. So once I, got them able to interpret the graph, then there was the issue of they didn't know their integer rules to solve the problem for the slope. Then I may have solved that issue with the calculator because high school kids have graphing calculators. But then here's the other issue. They didn't know where to put the X and Y. They would mess those up. And then after I fixed that, I realized the kids didn't know how to graph. It was like rise over run. I hate that because it does not help the students. The students were confused. That is a misconception. Like some teachers say, well, it rises downward. Really? That's what you're telling the kids? That it rises downward. Oh, okay. And then we wonder why the students don't understand slope. They don't understand that these are negative and understanding the quadrants and things like that. So that's why looking at this work is important because those misconceptions come out, and each group of students in your classroom have different misconceptions. And I'm telling you that from experience. So my when I was teaching high school, my students came with different issues, different like the kids at the bottom, all of them didn't have the same issue. Some were worse off than the other ones. When I was in middle school, same thing. And then we have classes that have characteristics. And then, for you all that teach in homogeneously grouped, meaning ability grouped classrooms, bless your hearts. Because the most that is the worst environment that you could teach in, a homogeneously group of children. But I'm going to get off my soapbox. But I wanted to share that with you all that you can group, instead of looking at all of your kids, you group them high, medium, and low. Even if you're in high school and you group those kids and you look at them, because when I look at my students, I look at them based on their tiers, not just as students, okay? And I do small groups twice a week. So my groups are fluid. I move students that grasp concepts quicker. I move them into other groups, and that's how we do it. So if you're in a high school, secondary classroom, those kids that you're looking at based on their work, you can say, okay, I'm going to have these kids work in a group because they have this misconception. I'm going to have these kids work in a group because they can move on. So that's how you do that with cooperative grouping and a homogeneously group mix. Depending on where you are, as far as student work, that's one way you can do it. You can always do it with heterogeneously mix. But if you are looking at student work, you're looking at how can I address these issues. So I'm going to go, let me see, here. Now, as I was preparing for this, and I was really shocked that they they had this on here. So this is a principal, and I want to say, I'm not sure where she's from. I wasn't paying attention to that. Let me see. Oh, this is in New York. And this was her statement. She said, we had to better understand our own data to make a difference. Now, this is an extreme protocol. When I was a tap master teacher, we had a student work protocol that we did during our cluster meetings. And this is something similar to that. And I'm sharing it with you all because I want you all to see how to the steps that this school took to analyze student work. So what they did is there was a challenge. How can that we improve student outcomes when other strategies don't seem to be working? So their solution was student work analysis as the lever for feedback and improvement. So this is what they were looking for. They were, well, not looking for trends and patterns in the data whole school level, but really getting at what the problem was, really looking at the teacher's data. So what they did is regularly examine student work alongside teachers from each classroom to get clear on what students need to know. They supported teachers and then leveraged their classroom observation around student misconceptions to understand the impact of the reteach plan. So this was their strategy. Weekly data meetings to plan targeted reteaching strategies. Now, this is what, let me go ahead and click on here. This is one of the things that they used. And I was surprised to find it on here. A know it, show it. So um it's, to me, it's very tedious, but I guess if you are a new teacher, it would be helpful. My nose is itching. It would definitely be helpful. So what your content knowledge, that's the stuff that the kids needed to know. And basically, if the kids need to know it, you needed to know it. So the vocabulary, evidence, understanding of organizational structure, this was for ELA. And then on the skill side, they had to be able to write claims and support. And then they went down here to find, this is a math example. So this is what the students needed to know. They needed to know unit fraction, fractional units, area model, number line intervals, and all the things. And then they put an example, which was interesting. And then they said, what do the kids need to know? So they said they needed to explain fractions, partition the area model, partition the number line, interval, express the length. So that was their protocol, starting out with a know it, show it. I am not, I mean, I guess it works, but because I've been teaching a long time, I do believe you need to start off, if you're new to the profession, if you're working with teachers, the content part, what you do, that's why I said that learning progression is important. The learning progression will tell you what the children need to know. So, and what they need to know may not be at their grade level, it may be a prerequisite from the previous grade level. And I think in this model, it does not address that for them. Let me see. Let me go back. Oh, I'm trying to click on it. There it is. It doesn't address that. Let me see. No, I didn't see any prerequisite skills or any differentiated instruction. What if the children don't get it? Because this assumes that they actually get the skill. So here's a lesson for two-step problems. All the things that they are supposed to learn and what they're supposed to show. And these are the skills. And then the lady was going to use so it goes on and on in their protocol. And that's what they did, this school did. Now, you're probably saying, well, how do I analyze student work? Well, I'm going to give you my steps for analyzing student work. So the first step I do is make sure the students are actually showing their thinking and their work. If you have students that are not turning in their work, then that's a problem. The way that I get my students to turn in is that I tell them, and this is for younger students, I just tell them I can't help you if I can't see what you're doing. For our older students, I will give them extra credit. So if they showed their work, they got some extra points to get them to show their work. And I know some of you all may say, well, they should show it anyway. Well, they're not. So you need to motivate them to show it so you can analyze it and help them learn and get those and close those learning gaps. So that's the first step. Get the students to show their work and show their, I say show their thinking, you say show their work. The next step is to think about your lesson. Your lesson needs to be, what is the theme? At the end of the lesson, what should the students be able to do? So like in the lesson that they showed with the fractions, should they be able to partition? Now I have a problem with exit tickets that do not encompass what they're supposed to do. Because you can't tell what a student is supposed to do if you're using a test prep item. I do not recommend that you use a test prep item to determine whether or not a student learned a skill. That is a summative assessment item. It is not formative. Formative is adjusting instruction and coming back again to address with the necessary adjustment. Test items do not do that. So with the example that they had at the school with the fractions, how are you going to know if a student can partition it if you're using a test prep item? Those are generally open-ended questions. You don't know what they're able to demonstrate because it's A, B, C, or D. They're clicking a button, or shading in a button. So that's the second step. You need to make sure that you know what mastery looks like. What does mastery of this skill look like? And I took what they did, and they showed the skills that the what they should show. But what does mastery look like? Really simple. So the first step, make sure the students are actually showing their work or showing their thinking, however you want to say it. The second step is ensuring that you know what mastery looks like. And the third step is dividing the students into high, medium, and low groups of students and jotting down characteristics of those students and what mistakes and misconceptions that you they're making as a group. And this is an easier way instead of looking at every student at the same time. So, analyzing that work, what that looks like is if the students are supposed to partition and you taught them a model and they're using an algorithm, that's a misconception. Because a lot of students feel like, "Oh, I can use anything for every problem," and it doesn't work. It goes back to the mathematical practices where the students have to choose a tool and solve it and be strategic about how they solve those problems. But this is the issue that they are having, is that if a child is using the wrong math tool, and that's what I call them, math tool to solve a problem, then you know that's a misconception, which goes back to, did they understand the problem? And those are conversations that you can have. So that's what you're supposed to be looking for. Mastery, you know what mastery looks like and what is stopping the students from mastering the skill. And those are those misconceptions that you address at either in the next lesson or at another time during small group, or if you're in high school during tutoring, however you want to address it, but it has to be addressed. But analyzing student work should not be labor intensive, because if you've done the work while you're planning and you said, okay, mastery looks like this, when you look at the work, you can eyeball it and say, oh, they're not getting it. This is the problem. And it should be a no brainer. So hopefully this is something that you can implement in your classroom, and start thinking about when you're um, creating your lessons. What does mastery look like at the end of that lesson? If you are introducing some kids will master a skill when you first introduce it. That's not likely if your kids are working below grade level. So, if you are interested in my problem solving strategy, this is called Problem Solving with Redraw Right. I adapted it from the Redraw Right strategy to support students who struggle with reading. It is something that you can use, and I update it yearly, especially when I found other things to help and support students with their their reading and mathematics. So if you're interested in that, I'll drop the link in the comment section. Let me pull it up. But this has been a labor of love that I've created. Let me see, problem. See if I can, oh, I'm gonna have to go to Podium. I restarted my computer and it did not bring that back up. Let me see. All products. Here it is. I'm dropping a link. So that's problem solving with Redraw, right? If you are interested in that product. But if you have any questions about student work analysis, I'm going to be going over this in my Math Intervention Academy because it's that time of the year. It's November. And guess what? It'll be test prep time before you know it. And we're going into the middle of the school year, and it's time for you to start looking at the students have enough instruction and start refining those skills and closing the learning gaps by addressing those misconceptions. So, if you're watching this live or watching this on the replay, thank you so much for being a part of my community. And you can always find me at theignitedteacher.com or at www.fuelgreatminds.com, or you can catch me on YouTube on Sundays, and I drop content throughout the week. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you all in my next live stream. Bye bye.